Back in the 1960s, Saturday mornings weren't just for cartoons, they were for giving the family dog a good scrub in the backyard. The old metal tub would be filled with lukewarm water from the garden hose, and Dad would roll up his sleeves while Mom brought out the bottle of that thick, sweet-smelling dog shampoo. The kids, still in their pajamas, would crowd around, ready to splash, giggle, and help in the way only kids can, by getting themselves wetter than the dog. There was something about that smell, the mix of wet fur and soap, that said, "This is home." You could hear the shake of the dog's coat from half a block away, spraying droplets everywhere, followed by everyone laughing like it was the funniest thing in the world. By the time the dog was wrapped in an old towel, looking like a four-legged burrito, he knew he was loved, and so did you. Long before store shelves overflowed with colorful pet food bags, our pets in the 1960s often dined on meals made right in the family kitchen. Mom would save the drippings from Sunday's roast, mix them with scraps of vegetables, and stir in leftover rice or potatoes. You'd watch as she set down that old dented metal bowl, and your dog's tail would start wagging like a metronome on overdrive. Cats, too, had their own royal treatment, a saucer of warm milk, maybe some bits of fresh fish from the corner market. There was no fuss about labels or nutritional charts. It was all about giving them what you believed was good and hearty. The smell of beef gravy on kibble, the sound of paws skidding across the linoleum floor to get to the ball, those were the sounds of a home that loved its animals. If you grew up in the 1960s, you remember the sight. A child walking the family dog without a leash law in sight, just a simple leather collar and a trust that the dog knew his way home. Saturday afternoons were perfect for it. You'd stroll past white picket fences, under leafy elms, and wave to neighbors sitting on their porches. The dog would stop to sniff every telephone pole, sometimes greeted by another neighborhood pet trotting along freely. Back then, pets weren't confined to yards. They were part of the community. Everyone knew everyone's dog by name, and if one wandered too far, someone would walk him home. That gentle rhythm of paws on pavement and the jingling of a collar tag was the soundtrack of countless small-town afternoons. Walking to the local pet store in the 1960s was a small-town adventure. It wasn't a massive chain with sterile aisles. It was a cozy little shop tucked between the hardware store and the soda fountain. You'd push open the squeaky glass door, and a bell would tinkle above you. The smell hit you first. Wood shavings, pet food, and a hint of fish tanks bubbling in the corner. Rows of colorful bird cages hung along the wall. Hamsters spun on creaky wheels, and maybe a sleepy cat dozed in the sunlit window. The shopkeeper always seemed to know exactly what your dog liked, maybe slipping you a free bone for being a good kid. Walking out with a paper bag of treats and a bouncing heart was a feeling you didn't forget.
In the 1960s, bedtime wasn't just about tucking in the kids. It was about making sure the family pet had their place too. For some, it was a big old Labrador sprawled at the foot of the bed, a warm, breathing comfort on cold winter nights. For others, it was a cat who somehow knew exactly when you were about to drift off, curling up on your pillow like a soft, purring guardian. You didn't think about pet hair on the sheets or allergies back then. What mattered was that feeling of safety and belonging that came from knowing your best friend was right there with you. On summer nights, the windows would be open, letting in the sound of crickets, and your dog's soft sighs would mix with the gently hum of the neighborhood. In the dead of winter, the creak of the old house would be balanced by the steady warmth of that furry body near your feet. And when bad dreams came, there was something about that wagging tail or that slow, rhythmic purr that told you, "You're safe. I'm here." Those nights weren't just about sleep. They were about connection, the kind you carry with you long after the pet is gone, when you can still close your eyes and remember the weight of them beside you and the unspoken promise in every breath they took. For pets in the 1960s, the backyard wasn't just a patch of grass. It was their kingdom. On long summer afternoons, the dog would charge after a worn-out tennis ball, tail wagging so hard you wondered how it didn't lift him off the ground. The kids would be barefoot, grass stains on their knees, laughing as they tried to outrun a determined game of fetch. The lawn wasn't manicured to perfection back then. It was dotted with clover, patches of dirt where paws had worn paths, and maybe even a dug-up flower bed or two, because that's what life with a dog was like. Cats, too, had their own version of adventure. They'd slink along the wooden fence, tails high, chasing after moths or batting at the laundry, flapping on the clothesline. Sometimes the neighbor's dog would trot over uninvited, and instead of a fuss, it would turn into a group playdate. 3 or 4 neighborhood dogs tumbling around like old friends. And there was something magical about the sound of a screen door creaking open, Mom calling everyone in for lemonade, the dog trotting behind you with his tongue hanging out, and the scent of cut grass lingering in the warm air. That backyard wasn't just a space. It was the stage for hundreds of little memories, each one tied to the joy of having your best friend always ready for another round of play. In the 1960s, a family road trip wasn't complete without the family pet riding along. Seatbelts weren't common, so the dog would usually be perched in the back seat with his head sticking out the window, ears flapping in the wind, catching every scent the highway had to offer. Cats were rarer on these trips, but when they came along, they rode in cozy boxes or curled up on laps, content to watch the world roll by. The car smelled faintly of vinyl seats, sunscreen, and the sweet hint of homemade sandwiches packed for the trip. Kids would reach back to scratch the dog's head between highway games of I Spy. At gas stations, the dog would hop out first, stretching his legs and sniffing the gravel like it held the day's secrets. Sometimes, the family would stop at a roadside diner, parking under the shade so the dog could watch through the car window, tail thumping when you came back with a little treat just for him. And if you ever stopped by a lake or a quiet picnic spot, you knew there'd be a splash or two when the dog couldn't resist jumping in. These trips weren't just about the miles. They were about making the pet part of the adventure, ensuring the memories belonged to them just as much as to you. There was something special about rainy days in the 1960s when you had a pet at home. While the gray sky drummed on the roof and puddles formed along the street, the house felt warmer, cozier, and safer with your pet close by. The dog would curl up on the braided rug by the front door, nose tucked under his paw, ears twitching with every roll of thunder. Cats would claim their favorite windowsill, eyes tracking raindrops racing each other down the glass. The whole family slowed down on those days. Maybe you'd sit cross-legged on the living room floor, building puzzles while the dog occasionally let out a deep, content sigh. Sometimes, a blanket would get shared between you and the cat, her purring louder than the rain outside. The world beyond the window could be stormy, but inside, there was a sense of peace that only came from knowing your best friend was right there with you, sharing the stillness. Even now when you hear a soft rain, you might think of that moment, the scent of wet fur, the muted light, and the unspoken bond that didn't need words, just presence. Back in the 1960s, the family dog wasn't just a pet. He was the neighborhood's unofficial greeter. You'd hear the jingle of his collar long before you saw him bounding up the driveway. Kids fresh from school would drop their satchels to the ground and race across the lawn, knowing a tail-wagging welcome awaited them. Many families kept a tin of homemade dog biscuits by the back door, crunchy little shapes baked by Mom on a Saturday morning, stored in an old coffee can. Every child had a job with the pet, filling the water bowl, brushing out tangles, or giving that final pat before bedtime. It was a simpler bond, built not on expensive toys or fancy diets, but on routine care and constant companionship. And when the porch light came on, you knew both the kids and the dog would be home, safe and happy. Cats in the 1960s often lived a life of quiet independence. They roamed freely, slipping between backyards, returning at dusk with a soft meow at the door. Families kept a small saucer for milk in the kitchen corner, a habit now frowned upon by veterinarians, but back then it was pure kindness. Children would curl up on the living room rug, reading comics while a tabby purred softly in their lap. Every so often, a grandmother's rocking chair would creak as she knitted, the cat finding the perfect sunny spot at her feet. Grooming was simple, a gentle comb, a soft cloth to wipe their coat,
and the occasional treat of fresh fish from the local market. It was a companionship that thrived on mutual respect. The cat gave affection on its own terms, and the family loved it all the more for it. Every small town had that one boy or girl who took pet care to heart. They'd be the one walking the neighbor's beagle in the early morning, or cleaning the bird cage without being asked. In 1960s America, caring for animals was often the first real responsibility kids were trusted with. It wasn't unusual to see a child pedaling down the street with a paper bag of dog kibble balanced in their bike basket, or carrying a goldfish home from the local fair in a little plastic bag. Pet care taught patience, waiting for the shy kitten to come out from under the couch, and gentleness in holding a parakeet on your finger. Those small lessons often lasted a lifetime, shaping how people treated all living things. It was responsibility, wrapped in the warm fur and bright eyes of a beloved friend. Birds were a special kind of pet in the 1960s. Canaries, parakeets, and finches brought life to a home with their songs and bright feathers. Cages often hung near the kitchen window, where the morning sun could reach them. Families would cover the cage with a light cloth at night, signaling bedtime. On Saturday mornings, cages were cleaned, water was refreshed, and a small treat, maybe a bit of apple or lettuce, was given. Children loved teaching parakeets simple whistles, and sometimes a word or two. The chirping became part of the home's soundtrack, blending with the clinking of coffee cups and the hum of conversation. Caring for a bird was about attentiveness, watching for the first note in the morning, making sure the feathers stayed bright, and feeling a small swell of pride when the bird seemed especially happy. Fish tanks in the 1960s were a little world all their own. Often placed in the living room, they were a source of calm and fascination. Glass aquariums held guppies, tetras, or the occasional fancy goldfish, their colors glowing under the soft light. Children learned to sprinkle just the right amount of food, watching the tiny mouths open and close as they darted for flakes. Cleaning the tank was a family event, with buckets of fresh water ready and gravel rinsed in the sink. Some homes kept a single betta fish in a glass bowl, a simple, beautiful presence on the counter. These pets didn't bark, meow, or chirp, but they brought a quiet beauty to the home. Caring for them was about consistency, and in return, they offered a gentle reminder that even the smallest creatures deserved attention and care.
Back in the 1960s, a summer morning often began with the sound of screen doors creaking open and the scent of freshly cut grass. In many neighborhoods, you'd see the family dog padding alongside the kids as they set out on their bikes. No leash, just trust. Dogs back then seemed to know the boundaries of their little world. The schoolyard fence, the corner store, the park bench where the old man fed the pigeons. They weren't just pets, they were part of the neighborhood's rhythm. A good scratch behind the ears was as natural as a wave to the mailman, and every kid knew the sound of their dog's paws on the porch steps. These animals didn't need a GPS tracker. They always found their way home, tails wagging. The household cat, meanwhile, ruled with quiet dignity. They came and went like a whispered secret. In the mornings, they'd slip out the back door, perhaps stopping to watch a butterfly in the garden, or to stretch lazily on the hood of a sun-warmed car. By afternoon, they might appear on the windowsill, surveying their domain with that half-lidded gaze that said, "All is well." Families didn't fuss over litter brands or designer scratching posts. A simple box in the corner and a bit of newspaper did the job. Cats chose their spots and their people, and when they curled up in your lap in the evening, you knew you'd been chosen. For children in the 1960s, pet care wasn't just a pastime, it was a rite of passage. It taught you to remember things, feed the dog before dinner, change the bird's water in the morning, bring the cat in before dark.
Forget once and you learn the consequences, not from a lecture, but from the sight of a thirsty dog or a restless bird. Parents knew these small acts built habits, responsibility, gentleness, and a sense of being needed. In many homes, Saturday mornings meant a list of chores, and among them was something for the family pet. And while it may have felt like work, there was a quiet pride in seeing your pet healthy and happy because of you. Parakeets, canaries, and finches weren't just decorations, they were little personalities in feathered suits. You could tell the mood of the household by their song. Some kids swore they could talk to their birds, teaching them whistles and tunes. And in the evenings, when the lamps came on, the fish tank would glow softly in the corner, tiny fins flickering like living jewels. The bubbling filter, the gentle sway of plants, it was a scene you could watch for hours. Fish didn't cuddle or fetch, but they had a way of calming the mind, reminding you that care wasn't always about play. Sometimes it was about quiet presence. As the day wound down and porch lights blinked on one by one, pets and their people would settle in. The dog curled on the rug by the door, the cat finding that perfect warm spot on the couch, the bird silent under its nighttime cover, the fish drifting in their underwater world. In those moments, you realized that the care you gave, the feeding, the brushing, the cleaning, was just the surface. The real gift was the bond underneath. A simple, steady connection that asked for nothing more than your time and gave back more than words could measure.